Hello and welcome to this meeting of the Planning and Development Council of the Town of Oakville. Madam Clerk, do we have any regrets?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Councillors Longo, Lischina, Knoll, Nanda, and O'Meara.
Thank you. Council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Madam Clerk, I see none. Council, we have confirmation of minutes from the last P&D meeting and the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee. And I wonder if someone would like to move and second that. Councillor McNeese and Councillor Giddings, thank you. Any objection? There being none, that is adopted as presented. We have two consent items. As it happens, they're both intention to demolish. Can I have is that a motion from Councillor Giddings and a seconder from Councillor Chisholm? Thank you. Any objection? There being none, they are adopted. There is a confidential consent item, and staff are available if you want to discuss it, but the report's pretty clear. Does anyone want to make a motion? Councillor Dudek and Councillor Chisholm, thank you. Any objection? There being no objection, 6.1 is adopted as presented. What Council has just done is authorize staff to proceed in the appeals to OPA 68, 332, and 333, and the appeal from the refusal of the applications for official plan and zoning bylaw amendments in accordance with the confidential report from the legal department dated July 2nd, and that staff be authorized to participate in mediation in relation to the appeals to the official plan amendments, and that staff oppose the appeals to the refusal of the applications for official plan and zoning bylaw amendment to permit residential development at 15 Loyalist Trail. Council, we have two public hearing items, and the public are welcome to speak from the floor on these two items. The first is the public meeting and recommendation report for the zoning bylaw amendment at 1287 and 1297 Douglas Street East and 3022 Meadow Ridge Drive. And I will ask if there's any member of the public here with information for council. And I'm not seeing any. There is a member of the public here, but I know what they're here for. It's a different item. In the absence of public delegations, does council want to adopt the item as presented? If so, a mover and seconder would be in order. Councillor Adams, the mover, the seconder. Councillor
I just wanted to check if staff had a presentation.
They do, if it's wanted, but
I would like to have it presented for the sake of the
right.
public who might wish to later see it, or
sure,
if they're watching.
We can.
Thank you.
I can recommend the reports as well to anybody who does. And Councillor Adams, can I just check, pending the presentation, you're still on for moving it? Yes. Thank you very much. Mr. O'Hare, welcome. Council looks forward to the presentation. Mr. O'Hare would like to present, this presentation covers both 7.1 and 7.2. And we may, depending on the council's opinion on the matter, we may adjust the motion to adopt them both afterwards. Mr. O'Hare.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor Burton and members of council. This evening, I'll be making a presentation to address two similar zoning bylaw amendment applications. They're both on the agenda in an effort to make the most efficient use of both the public's and council's time this evening. Item 7.1 on tonight's agenda is an applicant-initiated zoning bylaw amendment, and item 7.2 is a Town of Oakville-initiated zoning bylaw amendment. The applicant-initiated zoning bylaw amendment has been submitted by Corsiac Urban Planning on behalf of their client Argo Joshua Creek Developments Limited. Both applications deal with the rezoning of abutting parcels, as well as one remnant parcel, which is included as part of the applicant's proposal, with no associated development being brought forward at this time. For reasons more clearly outlined in the staff report, staff are recommending approval of these applications. It should be noted as well, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to hold a statutory public meeting on the zoning bylaw amendment applications and for council to make a decision on both applications. The subject lands for the applicant-initiated zoning bylaw amendment are located on the north side of Dundas Street East, west of Meadow Ridge Drive. The lands are municipally known as 1287 and 1297 Dundas Street East and 3022 Meadow Ridge Drive, and are approximately 2.98 hectares in area, as seen in the aerial image on the left of the screen. This includes the sliver of land that is currently zoned future development, which is approximately 0.07 hectares in size, and the Dundas Urban Core Block, which is 2.91 hectares in size. The subject lands are outlined in black and are denoted by a yellow star. The subject lands for the town-initiated zoning bylaw are immediately north of the previously mentioned site and are approximately 1.2 hectares in area. The subject lands have been outlined in black as well and are denoted by the yellow star as well on the right of the screen. As discussed in the staff report, the combined effect of the applications proposes to 1, rezone the remnant parcel of tableland so that it is consistent with the duck block to the south. 2, modify the H holding provision on the DUC block to include a new condition requiring the completion of an environmental site assessment and a record of site condition. And 3, to rezone town-owned lands to NHS to recognize the existing Joshua Creek tributary location. Staff are aware of a written submission that was made after the report was prepared, outlining concerns that the application will result in increased density and traffic congestion within the surrounding neighborhood. However, staff can confirm that there is no proposed development associated with either the applicant-initiated zoning bylaw amendment or the town-initiated zoning bylaw amendment. The combined subject lands are designated as urban area, primary regional nodes, natural heritage system, and are also located along a regional intensification corridor. This is outlined by the yellow star in the center of the screen. They are also located within the built boundary of the Halton Region Official Plan. Again, for reasons discussed within the staff reports, the applications conform to the Region of Halton Official Plan. The subject lands for the Town of Oakville initiated zoning bylaw amendment are located within the Regional Natural Heritage System. Section 116.2 of the Regional Official Plan states that within the North Oakville East Secondary Plan area, the Regional Natural Heritage System will be delineated and implemented in accordance with the town's official plan amendment number 272. The proposed amendment implements the Region of Halton official plan, which protects the long-term viability of the NHS system. The land use designations which apply to both the applicant-initiated zoning bylaw amendment lands and the Town of Oakville ZBA lands are Dundas Urban Core and Natural Heritage System. Staff note the current slide reflects the Natural Heritage System condition prior to the realignment of the tributary of Joshua Creek. An official plan amendment is not required to recognize the current condition. On this basis, the proposal conforms to the official plan. So the combined subject lands are zoned in 3 parts. Number 1, H50 DUC Special Provision 99 is for the primary DUC block to the left of the screen. Number 2, in the middle, the remnant land is currently zoned as future development and outlined in pink on the screen. And this remnant is to be added to the DUC block to the south to have the same special provision number and holding provision number. Number 3, future development is currently the zone for the town-owned lands on the right, and this is to be rezoned to NHS. The proposed applicant-initiated zoning bylaw amendment will also accomplish 2 things. It will modify the existing holding provision 50 zone to add a requirement requiring the completion of an environmental site assessment and the registration of a record of site condition. Additionally, the modified zoning will be applied to the newly added remnant parcel to provide for a uniform zoning on the entirety of the applicant-owned lands. Respecting the Town of Oakville-owned lands, the effect of the proposal is to amend the zoning on the subject lands from future development to NHS or Natural Heritage System to recognize the existing conditions on site. In conclusion, Mayor Burton and members of council, staff put forth the following recommendations for consideration for the applicant-initiated zoning bylaw amendment application and the town-initiated zoning bylaw amendment application, also known as items 7.1 and 7.2 on tonight's agenda. It is staff's opinion that the application should be approved as they are consistent with the provincial planning statement, have regard for matters of provincial interest, conform to the Halton Region Official Plan and the North Oakville East Secondary Plan, as well as represent good planning. The zoning bylaw amendments allow for the future comprehensive development of the entire DUC site and protect the existing natural heritage system area. Finally, and as previously mentioned, it should be noted there is no proposed development associated with this current zoning bylaw amendment application. Any future development on the Dundas Urban Core lands will be subject to site plan approval, which allows for the comprehensive review and analysis through internal town departments and external commenting agencies. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions of Councillor and the Mayor.
Mr. O'Hara, thank you very much for a very good debut performance in front of council. And Councillor Hazard-Thiel will oblige you with the first question.
Thank you very much, and welcome to presenting to council.
Thank you.
Could you just clarify for the public, because you referenced that somebody asked about and was concerned about density?
Yes.
When a proposal will arrive, which we know it will, if they stay in compliance with urban core, what is the approximate density, either in units per hectare or if you're doing FSI, one or the other? If you could give us some perspective.
Through you, Mayor Burton, the current FSI maximum for the Dundas Urban Core Block is 2.5. So if they were to come back through OPA 321, which came out in 2018, removed density provisions under the North Oakville East Secondary Plan, but there's still a zoning requirement of 2.5 floor space index on the current subject property. So if they were to come back and wish to build a density higher than that, they'd have to do a brand new full zoning bylaw amendment application. Otherwise, at the 2.5 density, they could proceed with site plan approval.
Thank you very much for clarifying that for the public.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Adams.
Happy to move the staff recommendations for these two items.
Thank you, Councillor Hazard-Thiel. Are you on board for that? Thank you. Any objection? There being no objection, both matters are adopted. And at one point, it looked like you could almost swear we're growing the NHS by a smidge there because of the conversion. So if that's the case, more good news. All right. That brings us to our one discussion item, the Midtown Key Directions for a Community Planning Permit Bylaw. The recommendation is that the report be received and that council endorse key directions identified in section 5 of the directions report, attachment A, and that staff prepare a draft Midtown Oakville Community Planning Permit Bylaw in accordance with the endorsed key directions for public consultation and eventual consideration by council. Councillor Elgar.
Thank you. Through Mayor Burton. A lot of things to read here, and this is a very complicated report. But the one thing I did like was what staff presented on page 59. They talk about the New York City Universal Affordable Preference. And I'm wondering, going forward, if somehow staff can provide more information related to, it's about ratios, affordable housing. It's that 1-to-5 ratio. You get into parkland, non-residential community facilities, sustainable development measures. Like, I do feel that the general public have no idea what the hell we're saying here. And I think that would help them. If we say, okay, you're allowed this many stories, but if we apply this ratio or this GFA or whatever, like a little more detail so that the general public can understand what we're really trying to do. I think it's good, what we're trying to do, but I think if people read this report, I'm not sure at the end of it, whether, I know myself, I'm not sure exactly what I'm reading here. A lot of information, but I don't know where we're going. So could staff comment on that?
Yes, Councillor, as I said, this is to get staff to produce a proposal for public consultation and then consideration by council. And it's my understanding that all of that detail is, yet to come. And this is the direction report, not the tell us what to put in it meeting.
No, well, I appreciate that because I do think staff hit on something that's really good and that we can actually go out and tell the public what we want to do as a council. So I thank you.
Good. I'm glad you're happy. Councillor McNeese.
Just wondering, is there a staff presentation? I think Councillor Algar's right. It's quite complicated, and going through the presentation, I think, would be to everyone's benefit.
Sybil von Kursel is prepared with a presentation, and I forwarded to you earlier today so that you'd have a chance to eyeball it once before you see it and maybe sharpen your questions. Ms. von Kursel, welcome. You can tell Council's looking forward to your presentation.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. Unlike Brian, I'm moving the microphone down as opposed to my body. I'm really happy to be here and to present the Midtown Oakville Community Planning Permit Bylaw Key Directions Report. The recommendation was already mentioned by the Mayor, so I'll just move forward. The purpose of providing you with this Key Directions Report was to provide you with some information in terms of what the administrative and community building matters are that will be addressed in the Community Planning Permit Bylaw. It also provides you with some options for how those elements could be addressed and some recommendations. And once you endorse the key directions provided in this report, then staff will be able to develop a CPP bylaw that addresses those options that you've decided on with respect to the key directions. So I'm just going to quickly go over the 22 key directions that are in the report on Chapter 5. So the first 6 are very kind of overarching key directions, just to indicate that the bylaw should be written in a user-friendly manner, that it should be compatible with online systems. It should be just structured in a way so that if we wanted to add another part of the town as a community planning permit area, it can be added into the bylaw without, redoing a lot of work. To ensure that the approvals process is indeed streamlined, that it's always being mindful of the fact that we would be implementing the bylaw in conjunction with the official plan policies. And finally, that it's structured in a way that allows for some flexible decision-making in relation to the context and current markets and trends and so on. So there would be a minimal need to update the bylaw or amend the bylaw. So the next few key directions are with respect to the administrative matters that would be addressed in the bylaw. So firstly, the bylaw would be specific to Midtown Oakville. That's our first community planning permit area. Certain matters would not have to go through a development permit application process, so those are the exempt matters. And those really mimic what we exempt for site plan approval, so they're very, very similar. So those types of matters wouldn't need to go through a community development permit application. It would go through other means in terms of their review. We also are recommending that the approval authority for the development permit applications be staff, and this is in order to ensure that we meet the 45-day timeframe for making decisions. And it's also very similar to delegation that we already have for similar matters. And then the last kind of administrative piece is around classes of development. So we're proposing 4 classes of development. And these 4 are basically associated with what you would have as a fee for a development permit application, the kind of notice you would be giving for those types of development permit applications, as well as the process you would be undertaking with respect to those applications. And as you see on the far right of the table, depending on the class of development, the notice of that complete application becomes broader or through different means. So the next piece I wanted to just quickly walk through is the process for approving a development permit application, which needs to be written into the bylaw. So it's a three-part process. The first part is the pre-application. So this is where the applicant would come in to find out if they indeed do need to submit a development permit application. If so, what kind of class of development it is, and then what they would need to do to prepare their application. So that's part one. The application would consist of plans and drawings, and in many cases also some supplementary documentation in support of the application. Part two is the actual application stage of the application, and this is where the 45-day time period applies. So at this point, the applicant submits their application. The town staff, if it's a class 4 type application, would determine whether this matter should continue to rest with staff as an approver, or if it would require council approval. And this is where if a decision is related to that development permit application that council would need to make a decision on, those types of decisions would then be referred to council so that you're simultaneously reviewing the development permit application along with another decision that you need to make, maybe something related to capital budget or something. Otherwise, staff will, be the approval authority, and there would be a notice of complete application. There would be a municipal review process, and there may need to be a staff report, or if it's a very simple matter, it would just be a simple development permit application approval. And then the third stage is the post-application, and it's at this stage where we would then issue the notice of decision with reasons. And if the application, if the approval of the development permit application included conditions, you would need to, the conditions might need to be met before a permit is issued, or it may be after, or it could be before and after. So if there are conditions, depending on how they're written, that may delay the issuance of the permit. And that would be the process, generally speaking, that would apply to the four classes of development. Some maybe a little bit, take a little bit more, a few more steps than others, but that's generally the process. So the next element or section of the Key Directions Report speaks to elements relating to the community building matters. And so what you see here in this list are things that you would normally see in a zoning bylaw. They're not that much different than what you would see in a bylaw, but there are these two additional elements, which is a range of variation. So we will be providing the bylaw with standards, and then some standards, there may be a range of variation that applies to them. And so that would be built into the bylaw. And the other piece that you wouldn't normally see in a zoning bylaw are conditions of approval. So we talked about how you can have conditions that need to be met before the permit is issued or conditions that need to be met after. This is in the bylaw. We would be identifying the types of conditions that could be applicable to a development permit. And one type of condition that's particularly noted in the Key Directions Report is the condition in relation to where an applicant seeks to have height greater than what's permitted, not greater than what's permitted, greater than the threshold height that we've identified in the official plan. So you'll remember in the official plan, we have some areas where there's a height threshold of 10 stories, some areas where there's a height of threshold of 20. And so therefore, if the applicant seeks height greater than the threshold, we would then impose conditions in terms of providing community benefits or otherwise known as facility services and matters. But in order to do that, we need to build into the bylaw what is that proportion of the community benefit in relation to the height that's being granted. In the Key Directions Report, we identified 4 options. In Key Direction 22, we suggest that we further analyze either option 3 or option 4. So option 3 would be a situation where there's a dollar value per square meter of development in the height above the threshold. And so it'd just be this flat rate. You've got, 100 square meters more than what the what in the stories above the threshold, and there's a dollar value associated with those square meters. And that dollar value, the total, would be what we could put towards a community benefit. And ideally, it would be an in-kind community benefit. So it's $100,000 worth of X, and then that would be provided. The other option is more of a quantitative measure as opposed to a cost measure. So you're getting 100 square meters more of GFA in the height above the 20 stories, for example. So we would like 50 square meters of community space. There would be some kind of proportion associated with each type of community benefit. And so with either one of these approaches, the proponent knows upfront what's expected, and they can build that into their pro forma, and they can make the decision that it makes sense for them to seek the extra height and provide that community benefit accordingly. And this process is also equitable. All landowners are being asked the same rate as, it doesn't matter what the timing of it or the land value, which is what the other two options we're talking about, which are much more subjective. And so the last key direction that I hadn't mentioned yet is number 21, and this is in terms of prioritizing benefits. So on the assumption that staff are approving these development permit applications, they're negotiating community benefits, it's helpful for staff to understand what are the priorities. You'll remember in previous sessions, we talked about the shopping list of community benefits. So now we're saying, let's kind of prioritize those community benefits. And so when we're negotiating with the applicant, we can say, yes, I know we wanted to have a library facility somewhere in Midtown, but to do that now, it might not work best for us. But we really do want to have affordable housing, or we really need the parkland that's right on your site. That's what would be the priority. So let's negotiate in that regard. So this prioritization list speaks to, the first priority would be the location, so that they're providing a community benefit on site. The type of the community benefit would be ideally ones that are inside the policy areas for Midtown specifically, as opposed to general community benefits. The timing, that it's being done concurrently would be ideal. And if it's a type of benefit that isn't funded by another source that the town has, that would also make it a priority. So that's sort of the kind of hierarchy of priority to help us to know what we should be really trying to negotiate for when a proposal comes in for the additional height. So that's the real quick rundown of the 22 key directions that we're asking council to endorse. And from a timing, in terms of like the next steps, the hope is that we will get the 3 recommendations approved by council tonight. And in the summer, staff will work to develop the actual bylaw. And in the fall, in October, we'll release a draft of the bylaw, hold an open house to entertain questions and provide more information on the bylaw itself. Bring that to council for a public meeting and to receive delegations. And then based on all the feedback that we receive through that process, we'll come back to council in Q1 of 2026 with a recommended bylaw for council to pass. And also just noted on this slide this is one of many things that we're doing in terms of implementing the Midtown official plan. And so what you see on the slide here are all of the other projects that are underway and general timing associated with those Midtown implementation program pieces. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Von Korsel. You have a question from Councilor Elgar. Before I go to the councilor, could you clarify on the 2 options in key direction 22, where you were talking about which way to do the benefits. Is it staff's preference that we endorse all of 22 and have you evaluate both of those options for us to make a decision later when we see them in more detail?
Yes. Let us do some further analysis, come back with some more robust direction around how those options can work. And so that would be something we could discuss in October.
Thank you for clarifying. Councillor Elgar.
Thank you. Through Mayor Burton, I must say, I thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate it, and I think a lot of us have no idea where we're going with this new plan, but I think it's going to be good, and we'll get things set and going the right direction. The one thing I don't like is what I heard tonight is staff will negotiate. Well, as we move forward, could that be kind of where we have a committee where you'd have the counselors in the area plus members of the public plus staff to help understand things better? Like, I'm just worried. I didn't like the one thing I didn't like was how that kind of jumped out. Staff will do all the negotiating.
Through you, Chair. What we're suggesting is when notice is conveyed to the public, the notice would include, so this application is proposing to exceed the building height, and in relation to that, they're providing or proposing the following community benefits. So at that point, we can receive feedback on the community benefit aspect as well. But in terms of the negotiating, that's actually something that the staff have been doing previously through Section 37 bonusing. So it's not necessarily something new, but I'm in your hands in terms of developing the procedures and the provisions of the bylaw. But that was the rationale behind suggesting that. And the other piece is because we're not negotiating on an infinite height, we are limited by the maximum density. It's really just about if we've got our prioritization and we know what our limits are in terms of the total density, I think you're in good hands to rely on staff to be able to proceed with this. But of course, you're always going to be fully aware of that negotiation taking place.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying, and I appreciate what you're trying to do. It's big what you're doing, and I appreciate it. But I do think that going forward, so that we can move everybody along at the same stage, that we can have. I'm thinking a committee of the mayor, members of council, specifically to that ward for sure, residential groups to understand what we're trying to do and do it properly. To that nobody's left behind. So I appreciate if you could think about that going forward. So thank you very much, and I thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sure staff can evaluate that and respond in their next report. Councillor Adams.
Thanks very much. I was going to ask a different question, but on this question of creating some kind of committee, I'd be really concerned if it was just local councillors and the mayor. I mean, these are questions about the benefit for the community as a whole, and if there's going to be a kick it to a committee of some council, it should be all a council. The question I had for you is with respect to the discretionary height that's involved. Is there a max on the height? Is there something that the community can expect in terms of where the numbers would go height-wise on this?
Through you, Chair. The height ceiling, if you will, is based on the total density that's allowed for the site. It's very difficult to say the height is going to be X because there's so many permutations in terms of what's the base size, what's the tower floor plate size, what kind of design did they do? Like there's so many different things that could happen which would adjust the height, or how much land is being conveyed for parks so that density is now going onto the top of the building. So I couldn't give you like an ultimate max because there's too many variables that go with it. But I can tell you that there is a natural cap because there's only so much density per site that can be applied.
Okay, so what's not really super clear to me is what kind of dollar figures in total we might be talking about in this process. And so we've got X number of different applications coming in, and in the entirety, what do you think we're likely to get out of the CPPS at the end of the day? And I think that is an important thing for the community to understand and for council to understand in terms of the decision-making that we're making. If we're demanding a certain payout in order to afford certain benefits, what is it that we're likely to get or have to give up in order to get those benefits? At the end of the day, that's what we're talking about. So is there a way for us to get better information about that?
Well, we can, when we come forward with the next kind of set of recommendations in terms of the draft bylaw,
Yeah.
we could provide you with some more information in terms of how that would work and what kind of dollar value might come through that process. But it's really going to depend from one development to the other in terms of whether or not they want to uptake on the increase of height and how much that increase will be.
Right, so if
Because we're not requiring it, right? We're not saying you must build more than 20 stories. We're saying you can build more than 20 stories.
But they can always have the density. So if we're too harsh about the demand for value for height, then we won't get any benefit.
That's possible,
And we'll
yes.
still have the density and still have the population and servicing requirements. And so that's why I'm asking the question. The final question I have for you is one with respect to, we have a bunch of applications that are in the door that are the matter of great public interest. Does any of the CPPS apply to those applications, or is it too late?
I think the applications are at different stages, so it's hard to say whether or not it would apply.
Okay, so there's a bunch that are obviously part of a TOC process or an OLT process, and I think it would be helpful for somebody in our staff to give some kind of indication about how this process may or may not apply to some of those things.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to the applications that are already in, they came in with official plan amendments and zoning amendments, zoning bylaw amendments. So there is case law which would suggest that based on the clergy principle, it would be based on what is in existing in effect. That is what the applications would be reviewed against. That said, there is also, I think, a fair amount of argument that can be made that council has made recent decision with respect to OPA 70, which does tie it to a CPP. The challenge is, I think, how the timing in which to make those arguments before the tribunal of how those applications would be heard. There's merit on both sides as to why clergy would apply, but also why it shouldn't apply, because there is this recent decision from council with respect to new policy. As Ms. Van Kersel says, it's challenging until we get into the point of actually hearing these matters before the tribunal.
Thank you. I think that's really important for members of the public to hear and understand that there's this issue going on. That's all I had. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question. In your presentation, and the presentation was an excellent presentation. It clearly articulated our process, and congratulations to the staff and where we're at this point in time. I know we got a lot more work ahead of us, but you didn't indicate with the community benefits a priority. We have a list of community benefits, but you indicated a priority of benefits within that area for that community. How is that going to be handled? Is that being a staff driven, or is it a collaboration between council and staff with respect to what the priority will be with respect to community benefits in the development stage?
Through you, Chair. So the official plan amendment already has sort of a list of community benefits in Section 20 that are kind of Midtown-specific community benefits. And then there's a list of community benefits in Section 28, which would be townwide. Anywhere we use a community planning permit system, those would be the types of benefits that could be offered. What we've done in the key directions number 21 is help to prioritize that list. So it's not that we're saying it always has to be X, it's just that when we look at what's being proposed, we're looking at, oh, okay, so this particular application happens to be where we would like to have public parkland. Priority one is location, so the public parkland is a high priority. In another situation, there may not be public parkland that we're looking for, so then that becomes less of a priority, and we look to the next kind of indicator of what would be a priority. They're going to provide something on the site. Well, that's a good priority that it's on site, because it also means it's going to happen concurrent with development. So it's not so much the individual benefit, but it's just how does that the proposed community, like whether it's the facility service or matter, fit under that hierarchy of priority. So it'll be context specific.
Okay, thank you for the answer, but my question is, would the when it gets down to that point, does it come back to council for approval as part of a report, a development, or and such, with respect to what that community development, or excuse me, that community benefit will be? Because I'm having difficulty connecting the dots on this one. How is that? Who makes that decision with respect to what's the community benefit? I know you've got a list and you've contextualized it and so forth, but the reality of it is somebody's going to say, yeah, we're going to do this. So who does that, I guess?
So through you, Chair, the way the process is that we are describing in the key directions is that at the outset, when the applicant comes in and says, I'm asking for 25 stories, that's 5 stories above the threshold, in order to, based on your proportions, right, whether it's the dollar value system or the in-kind quantitative system, that those extra 5 stories are worth X, and that X is going to be provided to you as a community benefit in the form of parkland, affordable housing, green building standards, or whatever the relationship is. When we receive that application and we receive the proposed community benefit that's going to with that extra 5 stories, that will be part of the complete application. So that will be in the notice. So the public, council, everyone will know what's being proposed. Then staff receive comments. So based on comments received, we may be saying, I know you are offering green buildings standards, but we really would like to have parkland. So can we negotiate this? And then the decision would be issued with what is the trade-off that has happened as a result of this application.
I think I've got it. So there is some flexibility with respect when the application comes through. Now, I guess where it comes is, as you're saying, notice of completion or notice of development of it. I'm still wondering who makes that final decision and what's going to be the community benefit. Maybe I'm jumping too early on this, Your Worship, but it's something to consider on not knowing how that's going to fall out.
Well, thank you, Councillor. Maybe I can assist with a follow-up. As proposed by staff, the applicant would be choosing from a council-approved menu of items, and they would pick what fits their vision for the site, and they would present it to staff for approval or negotiation. And in all of those negotiations, the matters on the table would be council's pre-approved list, the menu that people can choose from. Do I have that correct?
Yes.
I get it now. It's the menu. There's a menu to pick from.
Yeah.
Simple. Okay, got it. Thank you.
And we have already approved that list for Midtown in Section 20 and for the townwide in Section 28.
Yes, if I could add, Mayor Burton, and when you endorse the key direction 21 with the prioritization, that's the last piece of the council direction that we would need to proceed with the application.
Yeah, and for council's greater comfort, I mean, in my view, and I think what staff have just told you, your existing policies and choices have already ring-fenced this to only what only what you wanted. Not any one of the particular things, because some of the things on our list is bigger than a smaller application might be able to give you. And so you've got a bit of it's like a menu at the restaurant. There's more expensive dishes and there's cheaper dishes. So I think you're well set there. As well, we have to remember that I'm pretty sure in the Planning Act it says council cannot delegate planning decisions. So perhaps we'll be favored with a report from legal about what, if anything, in planning matters council can delegate away to anybody. Councillor McNeese.
Thank you, through your worship. So just a couple of questions. So based on that menu of options, or I guess it's the facility service and matters, I was just wondering, I didn't write it down, but the way heritage is described, I think it mentioned sort of cultural heritage, something or other. When I think of cultural heritage, I think of cultural heritage landscapes, not so much buildings, but is it just the wording, was that intended to be sort of going towards protection enhancement of, say, a cultural heritage landscape or a building or a number of things, or?
Yes, through you, Chair. It's cultural heritage resources, so that would be buildings.
So that includes buildings,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And then in a number of growth areas that we've dealt with just in general, whether it be Kerr or I think in Palermo as well, the grocery stores often come up. Is there going to be a space that's large enough for it? I know we can't dictate everything, but we mention other, sort of basic human needs like daycares are on the list. Are we able to get more specific around food sources or, access to food or grocery stores in some of these areas?
Through you, Chair. We do have office providing more office space as a particular community benefit that could be provided where you would, that could be negotiated. There's also a last item which is called other local improvements.
Right.
And I would say, and this is Gabe reminded me, if it was something like that, the proponent comes in with this idea that we hadn't listed on here, that would definitely come to council.
Okay, so there's
That's
enough.
where we would be like, we need to refer to council because this is not on our list. It sounds kind of cool, but let's check in with council on that one.
Okay, I mean, maybe if just give it some thought, if we could have a little more space for I don't know what the word is, outward focused food service retail or something in the office category or wherever it fits, just because almost every time in these growth areas it comes up. Because oftentimes there's not big, large spaces in the podium. So anyways, I'll just leave it with you to give it some consideration. And then just a question on the classes of development, so the way I read it in Burlington's, I think the classes were a little bit different in that class 1 was sort of, let's say in our case, you're 20 stories or less. Class 2 would be, say, 20 to 30, and then there's a certain expectation on the facilities, services, and matters, or the menu of options. And then my understanding was class 3, it almost goes up like, another notch that you're giving back even more if you're going, let's say 30 to 40, just because that's a lot of density on a site. There's going to be a lot more people needing a lot more things. So when I read ours, it seems a little bit different in the classes, but then we've sort of got it in another area, but I don't think that it sort of goes up, somewhat exponentially as the height gets more aggressive and the density gets more aggressive. But just wondering the thinking on that.
Yeah, so section 2.2.1 of the key directions report kind of provides the rationale behind the 4 classes of development. Just generally, we looked at how do we define classes of development and other types of applications. What are the things that we would need to consider? If you're a different kind of class of development, it probably means it's a different kind of fee, it's a different process for approval. And so we sort of looked at it in a way where it's very clear what class of development it is and why the fee is what the fee is and why the process may be slightly different. So our approach to the classes of development is different than maybe in some other jurisdictions. But that was the thinking behind it was more about some of these logistical and practical matters and moving forward, again, trying to be most efficient with the approval of the different types of applications that might come through this process.
Okay, then based on the, say the variance that comes in or how far off they are on, say, if it's a 20-story category, do you think we should be looking at if they're nearing that maximum FSI, should the percentage, or whether it's a dollar value or a percentage that comes back, should it be more? Like if they're closer to 20 than if they're closer to 40? Like sort of categories or tiers or?
Well,
Or
Ms. Von
maybe-
Kersel,
sorry, yeah.
maybe this is where you double back and explain link this to your earlier remark. That was one of the very first things you said, which was they have a set volume to work with. And so if it's taller, it's skinnier. There's, the volume doesn't go up as the height goes up. Maybe that would help the counselor.
Yes, through you, Chair. The ratio that we are going to be working on will either be like on a dollar per square meter ratio. So the more square meters above that 20-story height, the more dollars that are collected, the more community benefit that is offered. The other ratio that we're talking about is more of a qualitative or a quantitative and a little bit of where your priorities are. And I think Councillor Algar actually pointed to that page where we just kind of threw out some ideas. A 1-to-5 ratio for affordable housing. So for every 1 square meter of, for every 5 square meters of market housing, 1 square meter of affordable housing is provided, and that's all above that 20-story. Or it could be a ratio in relation to for every 1 square meter of, for 5 square meters of building above the 20 stories, that's 1 square meter of parkland down on the ground. And that one we were thinking more it would be in relation to whatever the FSI is. So it's really a fair trade in terms of lifting density off the ground and putting it on top of the building. So it's a very fair trade. So the second option, it takes a little bit more nuance to determine what are these ratios, but all of it is provided up front. And then it's just a matter of, well, how much more GFA did they get above the 20 stories, by building above the 20 stories, and what's the ratio in terms of a community benefit that we receive? And so if it's a small amount, then the community benefit is going to be a small amount of community benefit. If it's a lot of height, then the community benefits are going to be more.
Yeah, so I guess what I wonder if we're missing it all is just tiers in that. So like, say, I think in Burlington's case, it's, as far as affordable units at class 2, it's like 3%. At class 3, it's, 5% or something like that need to be affordable, is at least my understanding of it. So there's sort of, as the intensity, whether it's floors or GFA or whatever, goes up, there's more expectation. So anyways, just for consideration and, I don't know the pros and cons, but just it just sort of stands out that that's in Burlington's, not in ours. Okay, and just, actually, I'm good for now. I might have a follow-up later, but thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I read the report a number of times, and your presentation clarified an awful lot of the questions that I had. So for that, I thank you. Best practices from jurisdictions in Ontario. So CPPS has been going for close to a decade-ish.
Well, 2007 was the first one.
All right, so it's been around long enough. Any idea how many municipalities have implemented that?
Yes, I've been keeping a tally, and I don't have it in front of me right now, but I think there are 9 municipalities that have them in effect now. But the last 3 years, we've seen a bit more of an uptake, and we're seeing a lot more municipalities coming in and wanting to use this tool as well.
That's great. With the January deadline, it struck me as fairly short, but you do have some resources to work on in terms of other municipalities, which is good. How do we include responsive to market and contextual changes over the long term? Do we have the ability in a CPPS to go back to it on a regular basis like an OP and make changes to it?
Of course, yes. Sorry, through you, Chair. Yes, we can always make amendments as we work with the bylaw. On the flip side, there's also a 5-year time frame in which private applications to amend the bylaw may not be permitted. So we can kind of hold to a 5-year time frame, really test the bylaw and then seek to amend it. But council always has the option to amend the bylaw when they believe it needs to be amended.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Giddings. Councillor Haslett-Teal.
Burton, I have a series of questions, but I would like to give due consideration to the delegation that's been waiting. So if it's possible, could we hear them and then I would pose my questions?
Why don't we just finish the track we're on?
All right, thanks very much, Mayor Burton. So just as some follow-ups to some earlier comments. So can you just confirm that should an application be in process now and it be determined that it doesn't qualify under community permit planning, would it qualify under community benefit charges, which the province has put in place?
So long as the community planning permit bylaw is not in effect, the CBC charges continue to be in effect.
Okay. And can you also clarify that when do community benefit charges apply even if the community permit plan is in place?
Through you, Chair. So one of the conditions that we included in the official plan amendment is that we would have an equivalent. So irrespective of the building height, the 4% land value would be an element that all applications of buildings 5 stories or greater with 10 or more residential units would be contributing.
So it's not in addition to, it would be, can you just give me a little more detail on that?
Sorry, every development that is 5 stories or greater with 10 or more residential units will be, a condition of approval would be to provide the 4% land value, which is the same as our CBC fee charge. If they come in and they also want to build greater than the height, the development above that height, there is a community benefit that is offered. So it's everybody does the 4%. Some applicants will provide more because they're getting the additional height.
So thank you for that very important clarification to the public, because that is a financial implication that I think there was this thought there was an if not, then this, and so I'm really glad that we got that on the table. In terms of notification, I'm just going to go through a series of things as I went through the report. So from a notification perspective, it doesn't it identifies, I think, 120 meters. And I've continued to struggle with what that notification is, even just in our current practices. So my request is that the notification would be to the entirety of the Midtown area and to a greater distance, both north and south, because I take Councillor Adams' point. This affects the north as much as the south, and they need to have notification of the application and what the application is proposing. So I'd ask for consideration of that when you're drafting. In terms of Councillor Elgar's comments around delegation to staff, so I can appreciate that we, after many years, have moved and evolved to a site plan, is now within the technical expertise and it's within the professional staff's control. In the review of other jurisdictions, do they stage the involvement of council as they're evolving into a CPPS? And the reason for my question is, this is our first time out of the gate. We're trying to build a complete community. We clearly have a vision in our minds as council about what we want to accomplish. And while words will be helpful and prioritization lists will be helpful, it is a reflection of council's direction. And I'm wondering if you've seen a process where you start with an involvement of either all of council, which Councillor Adams has tabled as would be his preference, to advance the CPPS. Have you seen that happen with any other jurisdiction?
Through you, Chair. I think what I'm hearing is this idea of like, at the start, you want to be more involved, you want to hear more about what's happening, and then as as this plays out, you feel more comfortable. Staff can proceed with making these decisions. We could certainly build that into the process in terms of being more collaborative with council on these applications. I think there's a few things we could do. One is providing some more guidance around when might an application need to be referred to council. So we can give some consideration to being a little bit more clear about when that might be an appropriate thing to be doing. But if you look at the report, site plan is completely a staff decision. Minor variances are a committee decision. Minor zoning bylaw amendments is a staff decision. So all of the things that we normally do, which we are going to be doing under the community planning permit bylaw, are already things that staff are doing. Mm-hmm. So you've tested us, if you will, through our current processes. But we're happy to be collaborative and figure out like how you want this to transpire.
So, so I'm glad to hear that there is some interest in thinking through that element. In another jurisdiction, my understanding is that, I don't know if we call them tier 2, 3, or whatever, it actually goes to their council for that decision. So even though site plan is approved elsewhere, minor variance, et cetera, their CPPS goes to their council for that final check mark. And it really is more of as a result of a staff report within the 45-day period saying, this is what they asked for, this is what we've determined is based on your priorities, what we believe you would support, and there is an endorsement of the staff decision. Is there a reason we couldn't do it that way and have class 4 broken into class 4 and 5, for example?
Through you, Chair, we can do whatever you want. But what I would say is one difference for Midtown, which we haven't seen in other jurisdiction, is the fact that we actually have maximum densities. Mm-hmm. So because of that, like I said, we already have agreed to a capacity for growth, and now it's just a matter of how do we shape that piece of Play-Doh on the site, or build those Lego blocks on the site. So it's much more of a technical piece as opposed to like a decision that's going to impact the infrastructure you need and the services you need, because that's already built in through that broader implementation program, because we're using the same kind of growth forecast and projections for all of that infrastructure analysis that's being done.
Okay. I would concur with Councillor Elgar that I think we need to think through an element of some level of greater involvement of council, particularly even though the volume is established, we're building a new community in the heart of really of Oakville, and I think we should walk that journey together would be my perspective. Can you just help me a little bit on the variations from standard references? So we spent a fair amount of time in the Midtown discussions about the importance of should or may or encouraged or shall, and you might remember we got pushed off the plate a few times on some shells because it was thought that we should have a bit more flexibility with some of those words. So at what point do we understand that staff's perspective on it's not shall, it should, but we may not be requiring them to do it. So I'm curious as to how that gets detailed out for the public. Because again, as you referenced, clarity is critical.
Certainly, through you, Chair. So that is the exercise we'll be undertaking over the summer when developing the bylaw. So in the bylaw, we may have a standard, the 30 meters tower separation. So that's an official plan policy. It's a minimum 30-meter tower separation. So it doesn't, go away from that because that's the minimum. So you can't get beyond the minimum. In other sections, it talks about generally being 25 meters in terms of the street wall. So in some instances, we might have a variation on that street wall. Because in some cases it's 25 meters or the minimum or the right-of-way width, right? So in some right-of-ways are smaller than 25 meters. So when you look at, we literally are going to be looking at each policy, and if there's words like may, encourage, should, that means it's not a must, and therefore there's an opportunity for variation, and we'll provide some direction around and guidance around what that variation can be. And all of that will come back to council when passing the bylaw so that you're comfortable with the range of variation that may be permitted. Another example is the requirements for non-residential development. You might recall the official plan says for development in the urban core, 12% of the GFA will be for non-residential uses. And then the subsequent policy says, but if you provide us with a study that demonstrates something or other, we might allow for a lesser number. So it would be contingent on that study to demonstrate that 10% would be appropriate for this site. So that's where you'll see those kind of variances being addressed in the bylaw, as opposed to going to a committee every time somebody wants that variation.
Well, it is one of the benefits of getting to a CPPS,
Yeah.
for sure. Can you talk to me a little bit about the prioritization? So when I look at the directions and the four, and we talk about location, and you gave us some examples, but when I looked at one of the slides that was at booth 2 as an example, which lists the town-wide community benefits, the Midtown, I'm not clear on how staff would prioritize those. So I get that you might say, well, you've said location, we want it on the location. Mm-hmm. So I understand that theoretically, but this is a fairly comprehensive list. Yeah. Some, as I think the mayor references, are going to be out of scope. It's just, they're not going to want to deliver that. But how how much more detail will you give us when you come back on prioritizing this list?
We will work on providing you with more information. I do have a bit of a matrix that might help in further clarifying that. But let's bring that to you with the full package.
Okay, so to transition from that then, because what Midtown talks about, it talks about pedestrian bridges, transit infrastructure. There are some elements in there, separated pedestrian areas. But my understanding is that they are DCable.
Yes.
So would we be asking them to be at the community benefit when we've got their DCable?
Yeah, so in the list of priorities where there are things that are maybe funded by other programs, they might be less of a priority because we're getting the DCs to be able to build that bridge. However, we get some DCs, someone's going to provide the balance of that so that we can build the whole bridge. That becomes a pretty good community benefit, right? Because we otherwise would be, either paying for it up front and then recouping the cost, or having to wait until we have enough money to build the bridge. So it could go either way in that case. But in terms of like that first priority of location, yeah. So if you were the site that had the landing spot for the bridge, that becomes something important for us. If you're way over on the other side of Midtown, it might be less because we're not necessarily going to be able to build the bridge until we get the landing spot.
Okay.
Councillor, if I could supplement here. As Councillor Elgar has pointed out, there are any number of exemptions and discounts in the development charge program of the province of Ontario, and they've been growing over time. And in addition to that, a not often considered element of making a DC is there's a negotiation that goes on during the DC study process at both the town and the region with the developer community about whether they will agree that the project should be on the capital list. And they're subject to appeal. And so normally, in the interest of speed and efficiency in Halton, we're kind of famous for agreeing to agree to put things on and agreeing to agree to put things off to get something done. So I think it's a good idea. It's belt and suspenders, I grant, but if the DC winks out, I think it's in addition to the position that Ms. Van Korsel has just put, which is you'll need the supplement. It may be that you need the whole thing to replace it because of the fraught nature of development charges. We have the federal government and the provincial government working overtime to try to deprive us of development charges. So it's a good caution, I think.
And I fully understood that. I just wanted to be clear that if there is this option to get something higher on the list that is got other funding, it's a bit of a Sophie's choice at times. And how does that get decided? But I think this conversation helps, and I think further conversation is necessary to crystallize it. My last set of questions are just around the process when it comes back. So you're going to come back with a draft similar to what happened with Midtown, and we're going to see a draft layout and where there's going to be a discussion. We're going to have a workshop on it because, theoretically, this is more of a workshop. Like we're trying to figure out and understand. Is that something that can be built into the cycle?
Councillor, yes.
Okay, thank you. And with that, those are my questions right now. Thank you, Mayor Burton.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor McNeese.
Thank you, through your worship. Just one additional follow-up. My understanding of CPPS was that we would be able to keep some appeals local for minor issues. Do I sort of misunderstand that? Maybe I do. That some minor issues could be dealt with locally as far as appeals go? No. Okay, thanks for that clarity.
All right. Council, would you like to give staff the directions they're recommending? Councillor Giddings and Councillor Haslett-Deal?
I've-
Councillor Haslett-Deal?
I'd like to hear from the delegation first.
All right, not a bad idea. Madam Clerk, would you call the delegation?
Douglas McKirkin.
Welcome, sir. Council looks forward to what you make of all this, and thank you for listening to all of it. I hope it was helpful.
I think I'm more confused now than I was before. Can you all hear me clearly?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Could I have the next slide, please? I guess I should introduce myself, Douglas McKagan. I'm part of the Trafalgar Chapel Residents Association. So I just have two slides, and I'm not going to take very long. This banner at the top is trite, but it's really important that everyone understands how anxious we as residents are. We've spent the past few years arguing the toss about a vision for Midtown, and I don't want to plow that field anymore. TCRA accepts the need to develop a Midtown CPP bylaw and to do so with urgency. We strongly support incorporating best practices from jurisdictions in Ontario where CPPS is in effect. We assume that the initial version of the Midtown bylaw will need correction and update over time as experience accumulates and circumstances change. And I note that that is one of the key assumptions in the key directions document. We feel that the residents need an effective mechanism for providing input to that review and update process. The conversation that we've been sitting there watching. If council struggles with this, you have to figure that the residents, most of whom most of the time aren't paying attention, are going to be baffled by it. So I think if it is possible for staff and council to build into the review and update process some kind of meaningful engagement with the residents. I don't know what that is.
Well, sir, I do, and I'm happy to give you the assurance that it would be a full public process, as you're used to, on planning policy matters, including, as necessary or convenient, workshops.
That would be great. The workshops would be great.
As well as public information meetings,
Yeah.
the whole kit and caboodle.
The public information sessions don't cut it. They really don't. And I don't want to get into all of that.
Think of it as additive. And we can disagree about how much it adds.
Okay. May I have the next slide, please? I repeated the banner because I really think it's important that we all understand the magnitude of the change that we as residents are going to be participating in, experiencing, coping with. And we're not qualified to contribute materially to the planning process. Nevertheless, the magnitude of what is going to be done will inevitably cause backlash. I remember when the hospital moved, there were residents who said, when did that Who planned that? How come we weren't told? So, and that backlash is going to be unpleasant for everyone, and it's going to be unpleasant for the residents' associations because we're going to be fielding questions from residents as well. So we would really like to see the town put in place some sustained and effective public relations program for Midtown. I don't know what that is. I know that when the downtown was reconditioned, there was a process put in place. As far as I know, it was fairly effective. Certainly it targeted merchants more than the residents, but it was there. So if there is anything that we've learned from the Ward 7 development and the surprises that the residents encountered there, and best practice around the province, we'd like to see that put in place. And with that, I'm done. Lorraine has prepared on our behalf a bunch of, not very many, a few detailed comments, and we sent those as a separate Word document to the clerk today.
There's a question for you from Councillor Elgar, but Councillor Elgar?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Burton. Mr. McCurkin, I would just like to thank you for coming out and speaking for the residents of Oakville, and especially for the people that live in the area, because I hear you loud and clear, and that's why I think your organization should be part of a committee that we as council endorse to ensure that you going forward know what is happening. This is critical. So I really appreciate your coming out with your presentation. It was fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Elgar. Mr. McCurkin, I want to thank you for your contributions and your 2 valuable suggestions.
Thank you.
And I look forward to reading the document.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Hazard-Thiel.
Just a question of clarity on the directions. So we've had some suggestions tonight. We've had some discussion tonight. Do we need to articulate for planning staff specific things that we were asking for tonight? Or in endorsing this set of directions, do we have an assurance that those additional changes will be considered? For example, coming back with the ratio analysis, coming back with an option for either a committee or a greater level of involvement with council. Do we need to articulate that in writing before we vote, or do we have an assurance from the commissioner and the director that that in fact will occur with what's coming forward?
I don't think you need to do that. The spirit of the meeting was to canvass general directions. The staff are not bound to do anything except to explore these directions with the ideas that we've offered. Based on their past behavior, I'm sure everything will be answered and dealt with.
So thank you. I just wanted, I didn't want any expectations to be offside. And I didn't get a chance to say it, but thank you very much for the amount of energy it must have taken to write. I do actually call it a bit of a textbook, but I understand how hard you must have had to work on the pros and cons and pulling it all together. So I appreciated it. And I really hope that green and sustainability are high on the community benefit list, because if we don't do it with this process, we just may very well not be able to do it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Who's moving and seconding this? Councillor Hazard-Thiel and Councillor Giddings. Thank you. Any objection? Madam Clerk, there being no objection, that is endorsed and carried. Is there any new business of a congratulatory, emergency, or condolence nature? Seeing none, are there any requests for reports? Seeing none. Is there a mover and seconder for consideration and reading of the bylaws? Councillor Elgar and Councillor Chisholm, thank you. Any objection? There being no objection, the bylaws are considered read and passed, and that ends the work of this meeting. It's been terrific working with you, and I look forward to the next time. Good night.